So hello everybody. This is a Cravings training. I'm super excited to have two of our Wholist mindset coaches here. As you know, in the Wholist Weight Wellness program, we're focused on using the evidence behind weight and food and neuroplasticity to recreate the bodies and minds that we want to prevent and reverse disease, to be where we want to be, both mentally and emotionally and physically, and to make those changes sustainably. And so we do that with weight coaches and with mindset coaches. And I had a bug in my ear to just do some training today about some cravings. And so I have Jenny Harps and Sean Orr here. Jenny, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you do and why it works?
Hi, everybody. I'm Jenny Harps, and I am a mindset hypnotherapy coach with Wholist Health. And what I do is I work with you to access the roots of what's causing the issue that's bothering you. In this case, because it's a weight loss focused program or a weight wellness focused program. Often what we're looking at is where you first learned to perhaps overeat to ease pain, or where you first learned the types of eating habits that you have. And we just go right to the roots so that what's been stuck down, kind of pushed down underneath your awareness in the subconscious mind, can have a safe place to come up, be felt on its way out, cleared out, and then a new understanding uh, take its place. So the new, healthy, happy feeling state, then we just deepen that and it becomes your reality. And you practice it. You become your own therapist because you practice
Yep.
what you learn in yourself with me. So,
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think one of the most powerful things of what we do and how we help people is just that, bringing those subconscious thoughts up so that we can recognize them, safely confront them, and rethink them, and then put them back down so we have those new kind of thought train tracks again that are going to serve us to get us those feelings and actions and results that we want. So thank you for that. And Sean, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Heather. I'm Dr. Sean Orr. I'm a neurologist and a neuro coach, and I'm one of the mindset coaches for the Wholist Health Group. And so, along with Jenny, the two of us tag team often with clients who are trying to improve their quality of life. And so, Jenny and I come at it from the same philosophy and we like to go to the root causes of things. And my approach is really focused around the biology. And so, I take my knowledge of the neurochemistry, neuroanatomy, and help people to use practical strategies that get to biohack their chemistry and their function. Heather, you mentioned, the train tracks. We have a saying in neurology that neurons that fire together wire together.
Oh,
So
I love that.
when we practice certain thoughts and actions, and they become habits, they become deeply ingrained, and they can be really hard to change. So, oftentimes, working on the mindset is a big part of it. Working on the biology is a big part of helping people to transform themselves.
Yeah, awesome. And obviously, I'm Dr. Heather Hammerstedt. I'm the founder and brainchild of Wholist, a lifestyle medicine, emergency medicine physician. And all right, so today we're going to talk about cravings. And I love talking to you guys together because, again, same philosophies, but kind of coming from two totally different ways of approaching it. So it's really powerful. I guess for me, cravings are very real, but the question is, where are they coming from? And so the way that I think about cravings is often sort of from a biocycle and a social component. And it's figuring out, which part of that is it's coming from. How do we recognize that that's what it is, and maybe realize that food is not exactly what it is that you're craving or what it is that you need. But cravings are very real. We have something in medicine, called an MRI. And when there's a specific type of MRI, called a functional MRI, that helps us do a lot of different things, but has been able to show that there is a brain basis of the cravings. And it appears that it's really also involved in the brain portions that control emotion and memory and sort of the chemosensory stimuli of food craving. So just like even the taste or the smell. Um, so that's kind of from a bio perspective. The other thing is, that eating is pleasurable, right? And so I know, Jenny, you always talk about dark chocolate, right, as your craving, and things like chocolate can actually end up changing our mood by actually the use of the how much magnesium, tryptophan, serotonin, and other hormones and chemicals can change. So that's also just demonstrating that it is very, very real. And the last thing before I start asking other questions is just talking about, like, additionally, that the effect on the mood, your carbohydrate craving with when it goes along with consumption of the carbohydrate can actually modulate your hormones that are associated with depression. So it's really interesting that a medicine that we use to block the opiate receptors for people who are addicted to opiates actually can reduce food intake because of this kind of nutritional neurologic interaction. So it's really, really interesting. There's also studies on cannabinoids associated with that same pattern. So definitely from a bio perspective, there's a lot more going into this than like I'm hungry and I just want to eat kind of perspective. So that's kind of my overview on kind of making sure people realize that these are really true feelings that we're having, coming from lots of different ways, and figuring out how it is that we can identify what it is that we're trying to feed so that we can replace that with something that is not food. So that's my thoughts. Jenny, I know that we're going to be talking. I know Sean's like all excited. I can tell it behind his eyes there to kind of get into some of what I was just talking about. But I wanted to start with you. Like, you are going to think about cravings in an entirely different way than Sean and I are. So tell me a little bit about, how you think about cravings and how you approach them.
Okay, great. First off, before I came in here to do this call, I wanted a cookie. I wanted a cookie. And I said to my husband, how can I do a cravings call? I want a cookie right now. He said, well, you have to join CA, Cravings Anonymous. So part of what I do is I learn from tracking myself. I learned, of course, from all of my 28 years of study and experience. I learned from working with clients, but I learned a lot from tracking myself. And I know that when I crave something, there's a reason for it. There's not just everything is not perfectly in order in my life, and suddenly I want that square of Costco dark chocolate. It's when I'm tired. It's when I feel overscheduled. So I feel like I've got to go from this to that, and then that, and then that. Well, if I could just, then I want a piece of chocolate in between there. And by the way, chocolate doesn't work well for me at all. Anyway, really jacked up. I feel almost like I've had drugs because I have a very sensitive system and I've removed a lot of this stuff from my diet. So I'm going to say that the more sensitive you get, the more you're going to feel what the things that you crave do to you. So I really feel what it does to me. And I also feel what sets me up for it. Overtired, overscheduled, um, odd weather change. If it goes from really sunny to like it is today, overcast and windy and cold, the cravings start to arise. So what I suggest that you do when you're looking at cravings is just slow down. Like what Karen, one of our weight wellness coaches, always asks, what are you hoping this food will do for you? So just slow down and find out, how am I feeling? What's going on? And what's the shift I'm trying to achieve? Um, what was your question again? I got going.
Yeah, no, it's great. Just from a hypnotherapy standpoint and how you choose to help people with their cravings, what kind of things, like what are cravings often from a hypnotherapy standpoint?
I'm going to say, so first off, there's just the biological. Uh, what have you what have you learned to eat as a child? Your body gets used to that, and that's your realm, yours and Sean's realm. The body getting used to it is your realm. My realm is what was going on in your life when you first started eating those kind of foods. Were you, for example, arriving home from school and no one was ever there to welcome you? So you went to the snack that you had learned worked. Was it Pop Tarts? Was it a bowl of cereal? Was it ice cream? And the TV, so you weren't alone, for example. So wiring together, firing together, it's kind of what are those things that you started to do quite young or when there was a disruptive change in your life? A divorce. That's a really big one. Parents divorce. A move, some kind of abuse or scary situation. That's where the craving locks in. Whatever you reached for. And the craving can be for, I love the phone. It's, let me just get lost. Let me get away from the thing that feels bad. Whatever you use to get away from the bad feelings is going to lock in there. And good thing it does because it means you didn't die at that moment or go crazy. You found something to reach for. Thank God you found something to reach for. Only now, as you're maturing, as your body's not feeling good in your clothes, as you're looking in the mirror, you're feeling ashamed, etc., it's not working the way it used to work. It's not saving you anymore now, it's hurting you.
Yep.
And generally, if you'll really pay attention, that thing that you crave, I love my craniosacral teacher always says, ask a man what his favorite food is. Of course, we use the word man for some reason. Ask a person what their favorite food is, and you'll know what they're allergic to. So if you really pay attention, that thing that you're craving, you're probably having a sensitivity feedback loop that's actually leaving you feeling bad after you eat it. But a lot of my Wholist clients say, I go up. I feel really good when I have some sugar. I feel horrible within seconds myself. Um, but it's bringing you an up feeling, but it's bringing you something else also, which is both the emotions and the physiological response.
Yeah.
So we just go back, back, back. We just ask the subconscious mind to take us right back to where this first tasted good, to where this first began. And then we see what's going on in the life, and there's always something.
Yeah, and if you can, if you can recognize where that was, where you were in your life, and even just start thinking about how other ways that you could have felt that have fed that feeding, right? Besides that feeling, besides food. Yeah, really
Generally,
powerful.
where they start, where these kind of cravings start are 5 years old, 6 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old. There aren't the resources.
Yeah,
If there were the resources, this wouldn't have locked in. If
right.
mom and or dad were home, friendly, protective, interactive, kind, this wouldn't have locked in.
Hmm.
Um, there was another thought there, but I'll come up with it later.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think this ties into sort of what is hunger, right? I mean, cravings are different than hunger, but when we talk about what is hunger, it's analyzing those hunger cues. Is it coming from, my brain chemicals, right? Is it coming from my emotion? Is it coming from my social situation, right? Always in this particular situation, we have what, right? Or is it coming from actual kind of hunger in your body, which is, I think, probably rarely the case. And cravings, I think, are similar, that you can come at them from different ways like that. So thank you for sharing your perspective. Sean, what are you thinking about?
I'm just making notes over here. It's so great to hear Jenny's perspective because it's, these are the kinds of issues that so often if, I'm seeing a patient and I know that there's a whole world underneath what we're talking about. you can just almost crack open the hood and get in there. And Jenny's just so good at helping people to work through those, issues that go back years.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thoughts. I'm trying to organize my thoughts along lines from a neurological perspective to help put things into a framework. And if you think about cravings, really they come back to the idea that our brain is built to ensure our survival. And our brain is not too much different from a chimpanzee brain or a giraffe brain or a lizard brain. An organism needs to survive, and there's certain things that you have to do. You have to stay hydrated. You have to get calories. You have to propagate the species. You have to avoid danger. And sometimes you have to be predatory to get your food. So those all fall under system one of the brain, which is our limbic subconscious brain. It's so powerful. It's such a powerful part of our brain, and it dominates most of our behavior. And we like to think we're so special that we engage in architecture and make airplanes and fly across the world and fight viruses and things like that. But at the end of the day, that second part of our brain, system two, which is our frontal lobes, is very, very delicate, and it goes offline so easily. And when it does, we default back to the behaviors that we've learned over the years. So if we are somebody who was a latchkey child, right? We came home, found the Twinkies, and that was the thing that we defaulted to every day after school. Guess what? We're going to default to those strategies, the sweets, etc., because those neurons. Hello, young Hammerstadt. Those are the behaviors that we defaulted to, and we've learned that they make us feel good. And
he
so
was asking me for a snack, by the way, in case anybody was wondering what's happening.
I got chocolate.
He was asking. So, as we get into adulthood and then life has its way with us and we get kind of raggedy with all of the stress, our frontal lobes take a toll. Our hypothalamus, which is at the very base of the brain, and it's our regulatory thermostat, also can get burned out. And when that happens, we default back to the more primitive systems, and then we start to feel deficient in the sense of rewards. And so, we like to think that the best rewards come from the efforts of our hard work and our eloquent, expertise in life. But, the rewards also come from gratification of those primitive feelings. And this is where people get into trouble with, addictions. And it could be substances, it could be the internet, it could be all sorts of different things that we get addicted to. But they give us that false sense of reward. And then the more we do that, the more we train our brain to expect more of it. And so really transitioning away from those damaging behaviors to ones that are healthier you're essentially rewiring your brain. It's a challenging
Yeah, so you specifically in another, I think one of our coaching calls, we're talking to specifically about sugar and how that affects your kind of serotonin, which is kind of a feel-good hormone. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So serotonin is a molecule that we produce that sends signals between our brain cells. Our brain cells are called neurons. And different neurons communicate with different neurochemicals, and serotonin is a very important one. It's kind of a big, bulky molecule. We make more serotonin in our gut than we do in our brain. But the serotonin helps to make us feel happy, and it relaxes our muscles and helps us to fall asleep and stay asleep. So if we're deficient in serotonin, we get cranky, our muscles get tight and spastic and painful, and we don't sleep well. So it's kind of a bad combination. And oftentimes depression, as we've called it over the years, is a manifestation of deficiency of serotonin. So it turns out there aren't that many ways to get more serotonin into the brain. And what I like to describe to patients and clients is imagine that your brain is a big sink. And that sink has a faucet and you can fill the sink, or it has a drain that empties the sink. And so, as we're filling the sink with serotonin, if our drain is wide open, maybe we're draining out that serotonin, right? So if you have a stressful life, you've got a lot of things going on, kids, job, drama, that churns up your serotonin. And then if you're not sleeping well on top of that, it makes it hard for your brain to refresh your serotonin levels. So Antidepressants, for example, will close the drain so that your sink can fill back up. But if your genetics are a certain way, or your diet is a certain way, that you're only dripping a little bit of serotonin in at a time, it's going to take forever to fill that sink. And meanwhile, you're dealing with the consequences of it. It turns out that the serotonin that is floating in our bloodstream does not get into the brain very easily unless we eat glucose. And glucose will open these pores in our blood vessels and allow serotonin to pour into our brain tissue. So I'm sure both of you've seen kids when, Halloween, they eat the candy, they go bonkers, they have a sugar high. They're really getting a serotonin burst in their brain.
Yeah.
And that's where that feel good comes from. So a lot of people learn over time unconsciously that if they eat sweets, they naturally just feel less stressed, their muscles relax, they can sleep better. So it's a hack, but it's just not a very healthy biohack in the long run because of the consequences of the sugar.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that that sugar, glucose is one of the main things that can do that, releasing that into the brain tissue. There's lots of other conversations around highly fat-filled foods and other kind of processed palatable foods that have similar effects on craving and addiction, but don't necessarily have that same kind of direct rush of that serotonin. So that's really interesting. Yes, Jenny.
So, Sean, I'm wondering what kind of activities, habits, other ways of increasing serotonin than antidepressants blocking the drain, um, and glucose opening the pores, opening the cell walls. What are other things that actually increase serotonin?
So great question. There are a couple of easy things that anybody can do right now. One of them is to meditate. So meditation allows your brain a period of time to rest and recuperate. So even if you're not a hardcore transcendental meditator, it's not that hard. And the tools exist now to help you to get into a meditative state very easily. And it just allows your brain to cycle to a place where you can recharge your batteries, so to speak. So that's one.
Is
Another
there
really
is there an amount of time? So TM, transcendental meditation, and others like centering prayer. That's a
mhm.
Catholic approach or Christian approach. They're usually 20 minutes. Is there an amount of time after which the serotonin tends to begin to drip more, or is
That's
even
a
just a
great,
5 minute meditation helpful?
that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I think it probably would vary person to person and situation to situation. You know,
Yeah,
we
I think from what I think sort of like when we talk about insulin, when we're talking about weight and the both the height of the insulin being
mhm,
important with what you're eating and the persistence of the insulin, which is when you're eating. I think that this serotonin is probably the same thing, right? Like, are you getting a spike while you're doing the meditative practice? But if, like we've seen in the mindfulness data, like with the mindfulness based stress reduction programs that are like, 8 week, very focused, structured programs, that those have been able to show that like the persistence of the change of the way that your brain is working, because you've done it for so long, right? So you get that persistence. So I think,
right.
it depends whether it's a regular practice. It depends whether you're talking about improving your sleep to get better serotonin. You're talking about just doing positive things that make you feel good, whether that's being in good relationships, whether it's having a job that you love, right? All of these things are going to all kind of connect together when it comes to that kind of satiated brain of serotonin, I think, my opinion.
By
Well,
the way, anyone out there who wants to learn how to meditate, Sean, is that something you guide people in?
yeah, yeah, I do. I've been meditating since I was in college, and
TM,
yeah, TM to start with, and then I eventually shifted about 8 years ago to a form called Ascension Meditation. Uh,
ascension meditation.
yeah. There's a group called the Ishayan monks, and they're just outside of St. Louis, and they teach.
Finish
It's really a
finish spell
non-denominational.
that for us. The witch monks?
Ishaya, Ishaya.
Thanks.
Yeah, although I mean it's really not a religious approach, even though it can be. It's you don't have it can be any religion or agnostic or an atheist and still get the same kind of benefit out of it.
It's spiritual practice, not religious practice.
Yes, yeah, I would say it's a spiritual practice. But even honestly, somebody who doesn't believe in spirituality will still get the same benefit if they go through the routine of learning how to do their approach.
So I
Then,
think for people who are afraid of something like meditation or not really ready to do it, you can also just focus on being more present
yeah,
in your every moment. That is, kind of a way of meditating, but being, mindful or where you are. That can also has the same can have the same effect for a lot of people. So don't be too scared away from it.
So
right.
what
So
we're learning here is any one of us and other coaches in this program can guide you in learning how to meditate in a number of different ways that are non-religious,
mhm.
just healthful, quite simple.
Well, and
I included.
so the biohacker in me, I'm a big fan of using technology also to hack the brain function. And there is a platform called the Muse Meditation headset, which I'm a huge fan of. And I should have brought it with me, but it's a little headband that fits around your head and tucks behind your ears, and it has electrodes that actually sense frontal lobe electrical activity. It measures your pulse through this other little pulse oximeter, and it measures temporal lobe activity back here. And so it can actually measure your brainwave patterns and guide you with auditory feedback to a meditative state.
To
So
stop
it's a,
monkeying around in there.
yeah, it's a great, I think I've really advanced my own meditation practice to a new level with it just in the last 4 months. So,
Cool. So uh, that's from a serotonin perspective. There's a lot of conversation about whether cravings are coming from the lack of nutrients.
mhm.
Yes, no. I think that it's probably not as clear cut as people would like you to see in a top five article you'd read online, but we do know that sugar and flour are addictive, and we also know that it is causing a lot of the hormonal issues that we have because it is stripped of many of the micronutrients that you do need, not to mention fat, protein, and fiber. So when if you can't make clear connections to them, but we do know that calcium and magnesium deficiencies can prime you for sugar and salt cravings. Low magnesium levels specifically are kind of really known to trigger chocolate cravings. By stress and eating, sugar can actually decrease your absorption of calcium and magnesium and even diminish your stores even more. So you end up sort of in this cycle. And then, so calcium's important, magnesium's important. That's working on whether if you're eating dairy, then that's obviously yogurt, kefir, cheese, sardines, dark leafy greens, those kind of things. And magnesium you can find in nuts and seeds and potato skins and dairy and broccoli. And then the other one that is really important is a B vitamin. I know we were talking about this on our group call last night, but B1 and B5 help your adrenal glands. B6 and B9 really work with the formation of the neurotransmitters that you're talking about. So making sure that you have enough of those vitamins, especially in times of high stress, because your body will use your vitamins more quickly and making you more prone to the effects of stress, like overeating, when you're not feeling sufficient. So I think those are kind of the biggest ones. I mean, we could talk all day about like zinc and iron and things like that, but those are the big ones that I think have some pretty good data from a biologic standpoint.
I might just jump in there and reference B12 also. All those B vitamins are critical. Uh, the problem with B12 is that it's such a bulky molecule, it's very poorly absorbed. And I see this all the time with patients who present to me with neurological symptoms. They could have memory loss or confusion or vertigo or numbness and tingling, you name it. And B12 deficiency I see it all the time.
Yeah.
And and people will often be taking the wrong kind of B12, the cyanocobalamin, where B12 is called cobalamin, right? So it's linked to cyanide, and our bodies don't really go out of our way to absorb a lot of cyanide. So
Right.
I really recommend to people to try to get methylcobalamin, which is a different form of the B12, and that absorbs and goes right into the brain.
That's great. Can either of you kind of weigh in a little bit about um, maybe like a story, a success story, or something like that, or a method that you've used to help people with cravings that has been successful?
You want to start, Jen?
I'm just thinking one through. It's So we're not finished products. We're finished products, but we're not finished products if we're working on something like this. I do have somebody who I'm working with, and uh, first off, I want to say that if you consciously knew why you were having cravings, you would have already changed this, and it wouldn't be a problem anymore.
Yeah.
So first, I want to say you don't consciously know this is not your fault. You're not doing something wrong or bad.
This is skill power, not willpower, right?
Exactly, exactly. So um, it's going to take the time it takes to trace back to the need that this craving or this habit of what you're eating is filling.
Yep.
You're going to have to be patient with yourself. Somebody last night was talking about being doggedly patient.
Yep.
Patient, patient, patient with yourself. I've been working with somebody for a little while, and it seems we've just gotten to the painful thing that's at the root of the cravings, at the root of that habit that made things feel better at the time, quite a long time ago. Um, so there's no telling when each person is going to break through and be able to feel those emotions, let them actually come up from underneath, feel them, and let it come on through. In this particular case, I think it's just beginning to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, at the end of the 12 weeks. So hopefully we're going to get to keep working both physical wellness
Yeah.
and hypnotherapy. So that wasn't a really straightforward answer, was it?
No, it's okay. It's
Yeah,
we all want to keep everyone private as well.
exactly.
I
I'm sensitive to
Yeah.
give no details whatsoever. Yeah.
For me, I think a lot of people think that you can curb cravings just by breaking the addiction to like the healthy food, right? But obviously, as we're seeing here, that's only part of the story, right? It's the way that your brain is functioning with the chemicals that help or hurt us. It's the way that your brain is like actually in anatomy, how it's wired, and where your emotion and your fright sits in your brain, where your happiness is physically in your brain, right? Or the way that you connect your emotions and your thought processes, right? And we're all different. We all know that our brains are functioning a different way because of who we are, what our experiences have been, and what has either served us or not served us in the past. And so if we don't, again, recognize, confront, and clear those things, you're going to end up doing the same things over and over and over again, even when it's not getting you the reward that you want. Additionally, just avoiding the bad stuff like isn't enough, right? So that's why what we at Wholist do that's so remarkable and so unique is that anybody can tell you not to eat sugar and flour, right? That's not what this is. What it is trying to figure out what is the bigger picture and how can I change my life and change the skills that I have and change the experiences that I have and change my perception of what's happening around me so that my brain can function on my side so that we can start having patterns that do serve us with what we want. And then additionally, when it comes to like just the food itself, right? Avoiding the bad stuff isn't enough. We need to stop the unhealthful food, but replace it with health promoting and nutrient rich foods that still make us feel good, that make us feel satisfied, that make us want to eat them, right? So we're addressing the excess of bad foods while we're correcting the lack, the lack that caused the bad cravings in the first place. Does that make sense?
You know, I have been watching clients as they're working with their weight wellness coach. It only takes a week or two of beginning to eat 3 meals a day of foods that actually feed the body rather than draining the body. So of proteins, fats, and vegetables, basically. As I watch as clients learn that they can eat fat, that they can eat food, and that they must eat food, that the cravings just begin to drop away.
Not only that, but the number of people who are suddenly sleeping, who are suddenly shedding bad relationships, who are suddenly changing jobs. I mean, like, it turns out fixing your brain is a lot more than just going to get you the body that you want, right?
A lot of them start feeling a lot happier in the first week or two just because they're eating well and eating at intervals of 4 or 5 hours between meals and eating enough.
Yeah.
So they're feeling happier. Sean, you were about to say something.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of evidence that a traditional Western diet really causes brain damage. This is not hyperbole, and it doesn't have to be just Big Macs. A regular off-the-shelf Western diet that's full of processed food contains a lot of preservatives and other things that really damage the brain. And so when you start to make that shift, the first thing that happens is that you're just eliminating the junk that's been causing this problem. That in of itself is half the battle, right? And then as the brain starts to heal, things start to happen that haven't happened in a while. Parts of the brain that have been beaten into a burned out state can start to come back online. My business partner in my private practice is Dr. Drew Edwards, is probably one of the foremost leading experts in reward deficiency syndrome. And the two of us teaming up together have just had like this great experience, him from the psychological standpoint, me from the neurological standpoint, watching these simple changes in our patients in our clinic in a virtuous cycle, right? We all know what a vicious cycle is. Flip that, and exactly what you just described, Heather, is a virtuous cycle. So you make a couple changes, and then guess what? They start to pick up, and before you know it, the flywheel is going, and energy's back, mood is back, and then you just want to do more of that. So
yeah,
it's very gratifying to see.
Well, now I need to have both of you on the podcast. That would be awesome. Sounds really, really interesting. Yeah. So Sean, do you have like a de-identified patient story, or just an example of how you work in around cravings?
Yeah, I can give you a pattern that we both see actually quite often. So let's take somebody, a young man in his early to mid 30s who's been successful, but also has lived the high life in a big metropolitan area, gone out with a lot of friends, hard hitting, hard drinking, partying kind of life, and then is coming to see us because now he's lost a job, then lost another job, and now he's drinking harder than ever, gaining a bunch of weight, bad sleep, getting along poorly with people, rebelling, has to move back in with mom and dad, and life just is miserable for everybody. So this is the person that comes to clinic and also has headaches and foggy thinking and blurred vision, right? So starting from scratch, looking at what's going on with behaviors, looking at dietary behaviors, looking at alcohol intake, drug intake, etc., and sleep patterns and exercise patterns, if there is any exercise there at all. You get a baseline and then start to make simple daily changes, right? And you make, I love the way that you approach this, Heather. You always make this point, this is not like, you said this yesterday, Monday, your life doesn't change on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it does a little bit, but it's not like, it's magically suddenly a transformation. It takes time to go through this. So we'll often find when we're working somebody up more intensively that there are some comorbid conditions that occur, right? So they may have an inflammatory condition. Let's say this person has a C-reactive protein level that's off the charts. And let's also figure out that they actually have sleep apnea. And sleep apnea is so common. It's shockingly common. I think it's one of the big epidemics that nobody's paying attention to as much as we need to, but it's a problem that interrupts your breathing when you're sleeping. And so carbon dioxide levels build up in your bloodstream and oxygen levels drop, and this damages the brain because you have deranged blood flow to the brain. So system 2 is offline, and we're doing all of this limbic emotional thinking. Well, we get the sleep apnea treated, we get the small changes starting in the right direction, and get the right kind of vitamins on board, get the thiamine on board.
And finding other ways to get that dopamine and serotonin reward than alcohol and food. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Jenny, do you have anything else you want to add? We're kind of summarizing here a little bit.
Let me just look at what I was writing down here. Yeah, I want to just say that when you find yourself craving, something, if you can take the time because you're not running in here to get online, just take a moment, take 3 deep breaths. Isn't that a St. Alice thing? 3 deep breaths where you're a doc? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So let's do that right now. Let's everybody do that right now. So after that, just notice how you feel.
It's a reminder that you're not just living in your brain, right? That's the way I always think about breathing, is like realizing that like the world is not here. That
we're kind of in enemy territory when we're living above, when we're wearing ties that are too tight and we're living above here. We're kind of in enemy territory because we're not receiving signals that the body's giving us all day long about what's okay with it, what's not okay with it, what it wants, what it needs, when it's tired, when it's worried. So the next thing is when you have a craving, stop, take those 3 breaths, and just ask, how old do I feel right now? And the first response, if you respond too quickly and say, well, I'm just my age, I'm just me, slow down a little more and ask, how old do I feel? And if you can access how old you feel, then you know where you are. And then you can ask, what's the bad feeling and what's the good feeling I wish I could have? What's the good feeling that this piece of chocolate I think might bring me? Or these 10 pieces of toast. Because if you know the bad feeling, you know where you're headed, then you can ask yourself, will it really bring me that good feeling I'm trying to get? Will it really bring me that? And if not, likelihood is a walk will, a bath with essential oils will, a call with a friend will, a little bit of exercise, 5 minutes of jumping up and down or wiggling your whole body is going to shift that feeling state in a less painful way than that thing you were about to do. So
yeah.
how old
I
do
think physically that pause does something too, right? It delays your action and gives you a moment to reflect on what that hunger cue might be, what that craving may actually represent, and also give you an opportunity to think about how you felt the last time you had that and whether it gave you the feeling you think it's going to give you, right? Because when it comes down to it, like, if this was again just about what we ate, and if it was just about the number on the scale, we would have all fixed this problem already, right? And so it's delaying action so that you can contrast what it is that you want to what it is that you're going to get, and make a better decision in the future than you can at the moment, even if that future is just 3 breaths later, right?
That's a great way of putting
You know,
it.
Yeah.
and my hypnotherapy way of talking about that is if you delay for a moment, you take those 3 breaths, you step away from the cupboard, you take
Hmm.
those 3 breaths,
Mhm.
you can become aware of what aspects of you are at play right now. Because there's one who's judging, one who's saying you shouldn't do this. If you do, you're bad if you do this, it's judging. There's one who's trying to feel better from some uncomfortable feeling. And there's probably, kind of a friendly one who might be saying, just go ahead and do it. Or, well, sweetheart, I'll take a walk with you if we could just walk away from that cupboard right now. So there's different, if you become, it gives you a moment to become aware of the different aspects of you that are
Yep.
present in this moment.
Yep. Yep. I love that. Awesome. So quick summary, I guess, feeling and investigating your feelings instead of dulling them by eating or drinking, right? To avoid those emotional cravings, recognizing and repattern your social behaviors that may revolve around food and things you've always done, things that you see, things that trigger those, and then avoiding those biological cravings by removing sugar and processed flours and eating intentionally with a nutrient rich foods to get what you need when you need it, and to give your metabolic and physiologic and neurological processes what they need to flourish with all of the big kind of work that you're doing on yourself. um, yeah. Any thoughts on that? Sounds just that easy, right?
Well, that's exactly it. You just hit on the key of it, which it's not. But when you have a team of people that is around you who can help you to, keep you accountable, but also guide you through the process, we can essentially become the externalized brain.
Yep.
There's a term I really love in neurology. It's anosognosia, and really, what
Say,
if you
say
break
it
that
again. You
down?
broke up.
Oh, sorry, anosognosia.
Okay.
What?
And so that term,
Spell
it's ANASOGNOSIA. And so it's a lack of awareness of your lack of awareness. It's
that.
being blind to your own blindness. And if you don't know what you don't know, then how do you even begin to fix it, right? And that's
Absolutely.
a characteristic of what happens with frontal lobe brain failure. So if you're somebody who's really been struggling, if you're burned out, if you are overexhausted, tired, overworked, um, and your body has taken on that load, it's almost unfair to ask somebody like that to plan, and, without having a good structure. And this is really what I love so much about the program that you put together, Heather, is that everybody comes together and supports somebody. It's a ton of support that externalizes that process so that you can kind of rescue somebody and get them on the right path, and then things start to happen the right way automatically.
Yep. Yeah. It's sometimes you need external goals and external people and external reward before you can start to find that within yourself, because so many of us have not been able to do that for the majority of our lives, is to trust ourselves and to love ourselves and to know what our value is. And so, yeah, I mean, the way that I think about what we do, we're called Wholist for a reason, right? We're a team who is working on the whole body, whole brain, whole emotion, the whole person, in order to achieve long-term health. And we do that by realizing that experimenting with your own brain and experimenting with your body is not often something that you can do on your own, because if you knew how to do it, you'd already be doing it, right? And so sometimes you just need that personal accountability in order to adapt your biology, to shift your metabolism, to become a fat burner, not a sugar burner, and to really rewire those, neurons that are trying to fire together, right? So,
That's it.
yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. As always, I just really value you both, and I'm just so thankful that we all found each other and that we're, working to change lives as a team. So,
Thank you.
And
thanks.
thanks to everybody who took the time to listen to.
Yeah.